Well, hello, YouTubers and tuberettes alike. It's, well, you knew it, a short talk in the trailer park with the old guy. That's me. My name's Mike. Come on in, sit down, have a beer if you like. I prefer Modelo Dark or Negro. And so I just thought it's a Friday afternoon, just got home from work 5 minutes ago. And I've been kind of thinking about this thing today, and I thought, well, uh, I don't really have anyone to talk to about it, so I thought, well, I'll talk to you about it. And this is going to be old news by the time you hear it and stuff. So, but it's just kind of like, sometimes you have to kind of vent. I remember now I'm starting on a different foot here, but I remember somewhat as a boy. I was only 5 years old when John Kennedy got whacked, but that was a traumatic thing. That was a shock across the nation, and it had a lot of really spooky, weird overtones to it, just like this does. There was questions, and with this other thing, I'm talking about Charlie Kirk and his assassination. In America, basically, it's a damn shame that that's the reality that we're dealing with in our time. So, in other words, I keep hearing all these speculations about, well, we're talking about a possible civil war in the future. But why is it that it's the Republicans who are always the ones who are blamed as if they were causing the problem, and yet it's the other side who's out burning cities, as an example, not too long ago. Um, and when the news media gets a hold of a story about a shooter, let's say it's one of those terrible cases, in a school somewhere where 12, 15 people get nailed, or even worse, whatever. Anyway, the first thing that the media will almost always say, kind of like a knee-jerk reaction, as authorities are wondering whether this may be a conservative operation, kind of like, maybe this has to do with, the John Birch Society, or, somebody. And yet, again and again and again and again and again and again, just like this guy, as far as I understand, the shooter has been identified as a young dude, and he's been essentially radicalized. His parents sent him to school, and the school brainwashed him. There's a huge Antifa presence on that school, and the LGBTQ XYZ PVC people are out there, and in other words, it's very left wing, as they call it, progressive, which means it kind of comes from hell. But at any rate, the idea is that this Marxist garbage, which passes for ideology, basically took this young kid's head over, and apparently they've nailed the kid. I don't know 100%, but anyway, so this would be old news to you, that Charlie Kirk got nailed, and that the shooter, we believe, has been identified and taken into captive. I think his dad turned him in, who, I don't know if he is a cop or was a cop, the dad, I mean. But at any rate, I just got to thinking, one of the things that pops up about all of these sorts of things is that the central axiom of my life is that there is good news told in the Bible that applies to our lives, which by and large we ignore to our, shall we say, detriment and harm. But at any rate, the good news as it applies in this case has a very kind of interesting angle in the way that I would view it. The criticism of Kirk, supposedly, now if you listen to CNN or MSLSD or any of these other so-called mainstream outlets, Kirk was essentially a conservative, hardcore conservative, kind of like right-wing kind of guy. And so, of course, naturally, the liberal folks on the other side equate him with a Nazi, as if he had something to do with, the Auschwitz and, the final solution and, all that stuff. And so, at any rate, it's just a damn shame. But basically, the guy is, what he's guilty of, his crime is wanting to have open conversations in public. That was it. And the left can't hack that. They cannot allow their ideas to be brought out into the open, and publicly exposed for what they are: crap. And Kirk was really good at this. He, like I said, I didn't really watch the guy that much, and it was never like never following the guy or whatever. But he's a good square dude stuff. But the thing is that the thing that crossed my mind today that I kind of wanted to make a video about, by the way, there was a topic here, is that the way that we see things in this world is that it looks like, the evil is winning, the bad guys are losing, and they're taking it in the neck, and maybe God is really not kind of paying attention on what's going on down here, because you see clearly his side is falling behind. And yet that right there is the picture of church growth through the centuries. It's been when the church has been hated, despised, outlawed, actively pursued, jailed, killed, tortured, whatever. It's during those times when take a look at the church in China, Red China. The Chinese have done everything they can to stamp that thing out, and you know what? It just only grows. And so the thing is that Charlie Kirk was a strong Christian witness. He was a brother in the Lord. He testified to the salvation of Jesus and to his lordship and to the resurrection. And I mean, he was a straight up Bible guy, and a lot of his perspective came out of that too. Well, it also affected his politics, but at any rate, the point being, he wanted to have conversations in public, and that's what the other side cannot allow, because once that happens, it becomes apparent to everyone that their so-called ideology is bankrupt. It's worthless. In fact, it's from hell. It's on fire. And Kirk was really good at just pointing out things and, being real plain and obvious. And I think that it's actually encouraging to me in a twisted kind of way that the man got nailed in public like that. I mean, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back, and maybe I'll do another video about this as well. I'm going to look it up on that Gemini thing or something and see if I can find a source for a video feed, not so much of the shooting. I've seen an outtake of that, and that's enough. But I would like to see the conversation up to it, especially with subtitles, because sometimes the sound isn't so awfully good. I'd like to see what Charlie was saying that day, shortly before an evil, sawed-off little and a hoo, four-letter words out the wazoo, decided to nail him. And the testimony is that, like the Christian martyrs who went before, who were persecuted because of their testimony, because of their refusal to bow to Caesar or to, Kim Jong-un or whoever, and the result is the world hates Christians. It always has. Now the West has enjoyed quite a long period of relative peace, in terms of so that Christians have not been actively pursued and persecuted in the West, at least for several hundred years. And we've gotten used to that as if that's the norm. That's not the norm historically, okay? The norm historically is things like slavery, okay? That's regular. It's still going on today. The norm in history is that the church grows, yes, but under pressure from the state most frequently. And so the thing is that the pressure is growing on you as a believer and on me as a believer. Are you going to fold? Are you going to buckle? Are you going to back down? Or are you going to kind of stand up and say, you know what? I'm proud to say that, like Charlie Kirk, I hold forth the testimony that Jesus Christ alone will save you. And this news, when you imbibe it into your soul, begins to change you from the inside out. It's like a living seed. I remember when I was a little boy, I used to eat watermelons, in the summertime with my family. And I was always bothered as a little kid about eating the seeds. And my mom said, well, don't worry about it. It's not that big of a deal. And but I was thinking, well, what if I start getting like watermelon vines, crawling up my neck or popping out my rear end? And I thought, well, that's probably kind of far-fetched. But in other words, the new growth, it begins within. He transforms us from the inside out. Charlie was all about that. In other words, everything that the world is trying to tell you, everything that the devil's trying to tell you, everything that your own wisdom is trying to tell you, is that if you can imagine a scaffold surrounding a building, we're going to fix it from the outside in structurally. That's man. Jesus says, no, take her to the ground. We're building it back up from the ground, starting in the middle. And so he begins in your heart. He begins in your body. And when he enters into your body, let me just tell you, it affects different people different ways. And so I don't think there's any way to prescribe what to expect. But the sense in my mind of just welcome, just knowing that I'm welcome. That's what I've missed, so much of my life, really. And so, God bless you, and run to win. And think about Charlie as yet another martyr in a long, long list. And as far as I can tell, the scriptures say, and you got to sit down and look at this in the book of Revelation, that there's going to be a huge number of Christians killed actively, and they said beheaded in this thing called the tribulation era. And well, that might be coming up real soon. You might be living through that. So in other words, the idea that the world hates you, that they reject you, that they cannot and will not abide by your doctrine, that, my friend, is the highest compliment that they could possibly pay. To say, he's not one of us. What an endorsement. What a blessing Jesus is in our lives. So run to win, and don't forget. The thing is that these tragedies are just going to increase. We've got to learn how to sorrow deeply and feel deeply, because the other option is to simply harden up and turn into a rock and not feel anything. No, as things get worse, we must become more sensitive, not less sensitive. And that means being willing to be hurt. And for me, that's been a huge challenge, to be honest with you. So, am I good at that? I don't think so. But we'll call it a goal. Okay, a goal. But as far as we go here today, Charlie Kirk and you have something in common. If you trust the Lord Jesus, he's there waiting for you, and you're here remembering that he was here recently. And the thing is there's a real connection between us still, even though he's passed on. There's a thing in the communion of saints, it's a doctrine in the church, that we have a union with those who've passed. And the church is still one, even beyond death. He wins. Amen. You guys have a good day.